Hey guys, Mike in the Woods here. Last weekend I spent 2 nights out in the woods with some bushcraft buddies of mine, and the only thing I was allowed to bring was a fishing rod and whatever I could fit into a 10-liter dry bag. And if you haven't watched that video yet, I'll link it right up here as well as down below in the description. A lot went wrong on that trip, but it was very educational. So today I thought I'd show you 10 important lessons that I learned on that trip so that you can hopefully learn from my mistakes, or at the very least, give you something to laugh at. And real quick before I get started, if you're new to the channel, consider subscribing, hit the like button if you find this amusing, leave any suggestions you have down below, and let's get into the video. Number 10, bushwhacking takes a lot more stamina than hiking an established trail. I mean, I already knew this, but the hike in and out of our super secret Crownland campsite really nailed the point home to me. No nicely packed dirt trail means you're slogging through grass or mud, or both. Rocks, holes, roots, and fallen trees all seem determined to slow me down, and the lack of a clear path makes it much more difficult to make sure you keep traveling in the right direction. On the hike in, I was paired up with another guy, and with no established trail, it took us about 3 times as long to get to the campsite as it did for us to hike out with the others who knew where they were going. And this is including the fact that we had a compass and a GPS on the phone with a marked trail and camp location. Number 9, if it came down to it, I could probably survive with even less for a few nights. To clarify, I'm not trying to become overconfident here. I've just started to be more comfortable out in the woods with minimal gear. This little adventure really helped push me past my comfort zone. This is the second time I've slept open sky for the entire trip since my shelter crapped out, more on that in a bit. Now, obviously, that's not sustainable in the event of crap weather or intense wind, but I can build a basic shelter if need be. Even in the dead of winter, as long as I stockpile enough firewood to last the night, I can get up periodically and get the fire going again to stay warm overnight. Obviously, I have a lot to learn and I need far more practice, so I think later this year I'll try spending 2 nights out in the woods with only my survival tin, and stay tuned to the channel for more on that. Number 8, I still have a lot to learn about fishing. Aside from a failed fishing attempt during my first Crownland camp trip, this was my first time seriously attempting to catch fish. After trying it out for myself, and with the experience of those around me, it's become apparent just how little I know about fishing. Different lures, different methods of putting them on the hook, different methods of moving the bait in the water to attract the fish, and the difference between the top of the water column and the bottom. I did actually manage to hook a fish on my line, presumably a largemouth bass, as that's all anyone caught that weekend, but even then, it's not a confirmed catch even after you set the hook. I had him on the line running around, and he managed to get himself tangled in the weeds near the shore very quickly. Even with one of the other guys helping me to try and bring the fish in, he managed to get off the hook somehow by the time I managed to get my line untangled from the weeds. I think some more fishing education and practice is in order for me soon. Number 7, it's always a good idea to listen to those more experienced than you are. I mean, I was already doing this before, but during this trip, I was particularly out of my element, so I made sure to lean into the experience and education shared to me by those around me. A couple of the guys were very helpful in getting me up off the ground with fishing, and can probably be thanked for me even managing to get a fish on the line in the first place. I had also gotten some good advice beforehand about getting some proper bug-proof clothing, which unfortunately didn't actually seem to help at all during this trip. I got eaten alive through the bug-proof clothing, but it was good advice nonetheless. If you have the benefit of being able to go out with people far more experienced than you, or heck, even if they're not, there's always something new, useful, or interesting you can learn if you're receptive. Number 6, make sure your shelter can stand up to wind and precipitation. This is probably my biggest failure on this trip. Life pro tip, don't use those plastic drop sheets from Dollarama as a shelter. Absolutely useless. I had set mine up in a modified A-frame, with one side almost vertical like a wall, and the other one out almost completely horizontally. The open side was buttoned off with pine cones, and the wall was held down with large rocks to minimize shear stress on the plastic. Unfortunately, this was not enough, and the wind whipping in from the lake on the second day was enough to eventually tear off one of the buttoned corners, which then made it pull out from under the rocks I'd piled on the wall, and it managed to wrap itself around some trees, putting way too many big holes in it to repair. Thankfully, it was warm on this trip and there was no rain, so I managed to sleep open sky next to the fire for both nights. However, that was just lucky, and I learned that my shelter needs to be built a lot more tough to be able to withstand the elements. Cutting size and weight just isn't worth it if I wind up with an unusable shelter and have to rebuild one out of natural materials anyways. Number 5. Bugproof clothing isn't. At the suggestion of my friends, I picked up some bug-proof pants and shirt to protect against mosquitoes, black flies, and deer flies. And I'm not talking about some Walmart level stuff either. The pants and shirt each, if not on sale, would have been around $100. Sadly, even combined with vast amounts of bug spray, it was not enough to keep the bugs away. They really weren't deterred by the DEET spray at all and managed to bite, repeatedly, through the clothes. And the takeaway here is that even despite my best efforts, I am probably going to get bit at least a little, although in this case, it was a lot. Number 4, hydration is super important. I mean, I already knew this going in, but it's surprising that in a long sleeve pants and shirt, hiking through dense bush with no wind on a hot summer day, just how quickly I got dehydrated. My hike was only 900 meters, or at least it was supposed to be, from the drop-off, but by the time we managed to get to the camp, I knew I was getting dehydrated. You bet your butt the first thing I did was fill up my Katadyn from the lake and force down a liter of water. What I did learn from this experience is, when starting a hike, always make sure you have some water with you. I made the mistake of pre-hydrating before the hike and relied on the fact that I'd be able to fill up at the campsite from the lake. There was some still water in a marshy pond with a beaver dam I could have filled up my Katadyn at about halfway through the hike, but that thing was probably a breeding ground for all sorts of nasty pathogens, so I opted to wait. Thankfully, I didn't get too bad, but it was definitely a lesson on just how quickly dehydration can set in. I had to stay on top of my water intake for the rest of the weekend just to make sure I didn't get any worse. Number 3, don't assume you'll be able to catch food. Not only did I not manage to catch any fish, although I did have one on my line, I also failed to catch any crayfish in my Crayfish Trap, which I had one out with me on this trip. While obviously I'm a noob and still have a lot to learn, it's still an important lesson that I can't count on being able to catch food for sustenance. When planning for any trips or survival situations, I'm from now on just going to assume that I'm not going to catch anything, and if I do manage to, it's just icing on the cake. And this really pushes me more towards wanting to learn about wild edibles even more. Number 2, gear fails, no matter its quality. Expanding on a previous point, it wasn't just my shelter that failed, I actually had quite a few things fail on me this weekend. I lost a hook and a lure after getting it snagged on the weeds, I had a large chunk of coal, and I'm not talking about an ember, I mean like a large actual piece of burning coal, launch out of the fire and land on me without me even realizing somehow, and it wound up burning a large hole through my brand new sleeping bag, my brand new camp pants, and I managed to burn my leg just a little bit. Then my shelter ripped apart, as discussed previously, and to top it off, on the hike out, my brand new ultralight fishing rod caught on a branch and snapped the tip right off. Gear fails, and that's why it's so important to make sure you have multiple ways to accomplish the most important tasks, like fire starting, water purification, and so on. I had so many things go wrong on this trip, and that leads me into the last item. Number 1, sometimes everything goes wrong. Holy crap, this trip was a fustercluck of things going wrong. I didn't catch any fish or crayfish, my shelter blew apart, I damaged a bunch of new and somewhat expensive gear, I got slightly dehydrated, and finally, I got absolutely eaten alive by mosquitoes, even despite a supposedly set of bug-proof shirt and pants, and copious amounts of bug spray. And in spite all of that, I still had a fun time and learned a lot. And that's probably the biggest takeaway from all of this. Embrace the suck. Despite the negative experiences of the trip, I still enjoyed myself and came out wanting more. I guess you could kind of call it a bit of backwoods masochism. So, there's 10 things I learned from my recent 2-night Lost Fisherman Survival exercise with my bushcraft buddies. Some obvious lessons and some not so obvious. Never regret a mistake if you have a chance to learn from it. Even if things go awry, if I embrace the suck and roll with the punches, I can still learn a lot and enjoy myself. So if you're new to the channel, I combine fun, futuristic technology with traditional outdoors experiences, so consider checking out some of my other videos and subscribing. Hit the like button if you found this video interesting or at least amusing, and if you have any suggestions or commentary, leave it in the comment section down below. If you want to help out the channel, I'll leave some links in the description, such as to my online 3D print and paracord shop, where I sell a variety of outdoors and EDC related gear, and use the promo code SHAMELESSPLUG to get 20% off your order as thanks for watching this through to the end. Finally, come and find me on Facebook and Twitter so you can see daily updates on all the various stuff I have going on in the pipeline, like my long-range electric skateboard build for backpacking. Thanks for watching, guys, and I will catch you next video.